I mean, I hear this all the time in the Akasha, initiate that with a ton of grace by choosing it willingly. They're always mind boggled by that. And the record keeper's like, why do humans make it so hard? Why do they wait until like they're hobbling along to make a change? Do they forget all the times they died before? For that is nothing new. Don't let it scare you. Live boldly and authentically with every breath that you have. Your watch is ticking.
Oh.
Make it count.
Hey, soul family. Welcome to the Alive and Awake podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kay, and I have spent the last 20 years teaching people how to work with their wounds and overcome their greatest fears so they can learn how to thrive in a world where they were only taught to conform. Each week, we will dive deep into the practical, the spiritual, and the mystical so I can teach you how to do the inner work to know yourself, trust yourself, and eventually love yourself enough to create a world where you feel fully alive, awake, and free. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode. Ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode, everyone. I am here with my own spiritual teacher and mentor, Candice Rasa with the Rasa Healing Network. She is a licensed clinical social work and has an extensive therapy background and is an intuitive channel that helps us understand the Akashic Records and what we're carrying in our mind, body, hearts, and souls from this lifetime that we came here to alchemize. And it's really exciting to have her on here because I am personally aligned with her mission, where she really is one of those souls who came here to help us access higher level spiritual information and the Akashic Records so that we can connect to our hearts and to our planet to bring in more peace, love, and light in this world. So welcome to the show. I can't thank you enough for saying yes and for supporting us all on our journeys.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Wow, what an introduction. I mean, you got me all heart open, feeling teary-eyed, just feeling and vibing off the message of what we're here to do. And I definitely see you as a fellow like way shower on this planet. So I'm super grateful to kind of bask in the magic that you've created with this podcast to share more light in the world as well. And I'm just really glad to be here to kind of debunk some themes and questions people might have about karma, about the Akashic Records. So I'm excited for all that.
Wonderful. And the listeners do not know this yet, but Candice gracefully offered to open the record before coming on the call today. So she will also be working with the Akashic Record keepers to really channel in some high level information for the show today. So thank you for your openness and willingness to bring that in. And
Yes.
I would love for you to explain to the listeners that are not familiar with the Akashic Records, what is that? What is it all about? How do you put it into terms that we would be able to grasp and understand?
Yeah, beautiful. So the Akashic Record is really just a library. That's probably the best, most simple definition. I always used to describe it as a library, and now I realize that I can refer to it as spiritual Google, which is probably even better because it's non-physical, and you sort of search this library for your soul's name or any living being or anything on this plane's label or name, and as such you can track the vibrational memory or stories associated with that being. So people who read the Akasha are not psychically reading a person individually or talking to their spirit guides. They are reading the scroll or the history of that soul. And as you can imagine, to be able to zoom out and look at the landscape and the terrain and the interactions that your soul has traveled provide such rich information, not only for the present moment and where to go directionally, but to know the legacy and the history of not only your assets, but your wounds and how they've shaped you. I feel like it's the ultimate GPS. And when you're channeling, you're not like, so today we'll have these moments where there'll be maybe spontaneous Akashic information to will come in, and I inspire folks to listen for the differences of that, because while it's information, I'm still present in my body. So someone who's channeling, sometimes people do things like trans mediumship or trans channeling, which is you're not fully conscious. And when you read the Akasha, you're fully conscious. So there's this beauty of having like an altered states experience, but being really in your form. So the integration is real time and really potent. And it's subtle, but as you know, anyone can learn to read the record. Alicia here has trained with me, and it's life changing. I mean, obviously, I feel biased about that, but it's a game changer for people and how they work with trauma.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on the first time I ever was even introduced to something like this, where I was in a group, meditation group, and these women, and this one woman, you could just tell her energy was different. She was vibrant and full of life and just really just an incredible soul. And she started talking to the group about, meeting her higher self. And I was like, what's your higher self? what is
Who's
that?
that?
Like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, yeah, I had this reading done with this woman that met with my higher self in the spirit realm. And I was like, whoa, I don't think I'm supposed to do that. But I lit up, like something inside of me was curious. And I was like, well, my religion says I'm not supposed to do this kind of stuff. So there was some fear there, but I eventually said, if I'm meeting with myself in the spirit form, what's the harm in that? So
Yeah.
how would you explain your higher self? Like, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, I feel really passionate about like the tree you're barking up, up right now, which is this idea that your true self was feeling aligned and called and connected to something larger, which I think is at the core of God, whatever that energy is. And if God is the energy of love and connectedness, then truly we can never be separate from that. Right. And religion, I think, sometimes seeks to create separateness. Like you can only be connected to God if you behave a certain way, or you do something a certain way, or you show up in a certain way. And so I think there can be lots of fear for people around having their own personal relationship with God, or the energy of unity, the energy of love. So I think like it makes sense to me that you felt fear. I think it makes sense to me that a lot of clients I meet feel afraid of this energy, but I think it's a path of connection to God, the Akashic field. I think your connection to your higher self, which I would define as, I mean, I hear the Akashic record keepers now. We would say that the higher self is a culminated, blended, alchemized version of the soul on this plane interwoven with God. It is a beautiful sort of melting pot of whatever soul's experiences you've had, and the wisdom of that mixed with the energy of love and unity, which creates a unique harmonic or a unique flavor for everybody on this plane. And when you can tap into that higher version of you, which is devoid the pain body, then you have the ultimate wisdom, and or the ultimate they show me like the captain's position in a boat, where you can climb up and sit in that little captain's booth and see with your binoculars far and wide. Like that's the higher self, right? We're not like below deck bouncing around in the waves in this boat. We can see where we are. We have full landscape and access to make choices. And I think that's probably a really beautiful description of the higher self.
Oh, I love it. I love how that came through. And it is that, and you can see the visual of that. And that certainly has been what knowing this information has done for me. That I did meet with my first person that met with my higher self. And the first thing that she said to me when she saw my higher being come in was, God placed a kiss of protection on you and on your forehead before you came into this life, because he knew that you would need it. And I softened and I was like, oh, maybe I'm not doing something wrong, and I knew that like there was full body confirmation that was true for me, because I always looked back on my life and was like, how did I survive the things that I went through? And how did I possibly get through that when I could have easily ended up, dead
Sure.
or, all kinds of things? And that made complete sense to me. And then in that reading, essentially my higher being rolled out like this scroll of
Mm,
these things that I came here to work through in this lifetime. And I was like, oh, okay. And then pairing that up with your reading that I did with you, and the introduction was so powerful and beautiful around, where my soul came from. And you said the words to me that my soul has never been in the dark for what
mm,
I came here to work through in this lifetime. And for me, that also gave me confirmation that I'm not, so I'm not a, I don't like the word victim because that feels like I'm like more wounded than true, but that's
yeah.
how I felt a lot of my life.
Yeah.
And to have access to this information, that there was a part of me, maybe not the human ego conscious part of
Sure.
me, that chose these experiences and chose to work through this stuff in this lifetime, but it really gave me a sense of peace and empowerment
Mhm.
that I'm here for a reason, and that I came into this body and into this life by choice.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that statement right there, depending on the season of life that someone is in, can be devastating or freeing,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Good point.
I'm here
Yes,
for a
very much
reason,
so.
and everything I'm experiencing is happening, for me, can
Mm,
be like fighting words depending on what you're experiencing, right? Or really, really like a blessed experience. And I think such is what it means to be human, right? We're ebbing and flowing, we're rolling through various patterns that are repeating because of karmic and ancestral past life traumas. And it's easy to get lost in that mindset that like we're just a leaf blowing in the wind with no direction. I think the Akasha shows us that there is direction, that we do have purpose, that we do have power. And not only that, we have resources available to us, inner resources, external resources that enable us to take a path that is less perhaps off-roading and more graceful. I think that's my biggest mission in talking about the Akasha with people is like it's a path that shows you the most graceful way to
mm.
achieve unity and harmony within your own soul. So, I mean, I really resonate with that description that you shared. And you have to, I find myself having to be careful about like, yeah, everything that you experience, the suffering, the trauma, like you designed that, you chose that. People will say, well, how is that possible? Right? There was so much pain in that. And I think like what is often a misconception is people kind of look to something outside of themselves to blame, right? Like whoever God is, it's definitely his fault, right? This
Mhm.
male energetic, or it's my mom's fault, or it's so and so's fault. And the reality is, when our soul experiences trauma, it fragments a bit away from that unity consciousness, that God consciousness that we truly are. And
Yes.
we assume in lots of ways identity outside of our wholeness. And when that fragmentation happens, it becomes embedded in our soul memory. And as such, it goes into the download of the computer, if you will. And then the next life, we come in and we have this programming that's not in harmony with love. And so by design, we attract and magnetize the people to the
Mm.
pattern that is unhealed. So, you have to say that with lots of love because sometimes it's like, well, you mean I chose to have all of these things happen to me, right? Like that's a tough thing. But hopefully in my description, now it can be understood, right? Because it's not like we're being punished, we're being given an opportunity to clear and to move through that wound, right? It's that Rumi quote, right? The crack is where the light enters you. That's really what happens. And I think in many ways that can be empowering if we let it.
I love the way you describe that. So it's not necessarily that we choose the experience, it's that we're an energetic match for it so that we can re-experience the wound and come at it and learn a new way to bring in more love, to bring in more light, understanding. and really rise above that pattern.
Yes, 1,000,000%. Perfectly said. Yeah. And so that positions a really juicy question, right? Which is, how can I
Mm,
be showing up with this pattern for the highest good of my soul? Which suddenly shifts the power differential back to you, right? As someone who may have experienced hardship or trauma, right? It's almost like I've sort of lost in that, but now suddenly, how might I take ownership and power for this pattern, right? And it's not from a place of blame. It's almost like outside of that, transcendent of that. It's more from a
yes.
place of love, right? How can I own more of this love within myself and create, healing around this trauma?
Yeah, there's so many things are flashing when it comes to that, because you and other teachers have given me, and certainly the work that I do in the world and being a trauma therapist is has helped me. But when you're experiencing those patterns, or you keep putting yourself back into those places, or clients do, they
Yeah.
feel so much shame. So, how do you help someone overcome the real human feeling of shame that comes with not being able to break through the pattern, or keep repeating it, or ending up in the same situations?
Yeah, I think that shame is not a feeling state that is part of, I mean, I hear the Akashic Record Keepers again saying it's not part of the rainbow of emotional access points. It's almost a denser emotion that is projected upon us. Almost
Mm,
like they show me Linus with the dark cloud in the rain, right? And shame kind of representing that. Um, and they say that the emotion here that is more useful would be the core feeling around the trauma itself, which may feel like anger or sadness or rejection or fear, right, at the
mm,
core of things. And in my work in the Akasha, there's this focus on depersonalization from the experience itself and alignment with the higher self, the version of you that knows, the wise version of you, the version of you that loves you unconditionally, and tapping people into that frequency. And that's not really, often done overnight, but I think what can happen overnight is the depersonalization that begins as the observer. When you take an observer stance, you are automatically not the one experiencing the
mm.
trauma or the thought or the shame. You are the one watching that process happen. And if you are the one watching, then you are separate from that. And then, the juicy question of like, then who am I? Who's the one who's watching? I don't know. It's, let's find out together, right? Like, then there's a separation between the trauma itself. And I think I mentioned that because a lot of folks, you mentioned shame, but over identify with their pain and trauma in a way where that becomes their identity. It's
Yes.
who they are. And that becomes a very deep pairing. So to be able to say to use the observer as a very simple tool to start with, create separation. And then ultimately it's more union with the divine, more union with higher self that allows us to have access to that deeper self-love and claim and reorganize whatever trauma thoughts we have to a more neutral space.
Oh, I love that. I think it's so powerful to, yes, to separate ourselves from the story, from the experience, and take that bird's eye view. And you kept mentioning like inner self-love, or really knowing that you're loved. So for people who struggle with that, or who say, if I was loved, there's no way that these things would be happening to me. And how could anyone ever love me knowing the things that I have gone through or that I've done? What does the Akasha say around this? I don't even know what to call it, but I
Yeah.
think it feels like it's separation. It feels like a curse. Like it feels like a very like huge
Yeah.
disconnect from
Yes.
God, from source.
Yeah.
So there's so many people that say, I must not be lovable if these things happen to me or keep happening to me.
Yeah, so I'm just going to channel just directly because I hear the answer, and it says within each soul is an access point of love. Within each soul, regardless of their experiences, knows love.
Mm.
They know the love that they've craved at the very least, but often can attach that experience and emotion to something in their life
Mm.
as the lover or the one who is loved. But within that access point of love is all eternity for healing. That's what
Mm.
I hear them say. And connection to what it feels like to be in that flow from a somatic feeling state. And they show me like a cocoon, like someone wrapped in a cocoon of that space, is a beautiful starting place for recognition of that work. And I hear sometimes that's simple, right? It's like it almost feels like the surrender or the hammocking into the part of you that knows what love is.
Mm.
And you may not have experienced that with certain humans and certain relationships, but there's a part, they show me, for example, someone who would love an animal in a certain way, or had a teacher that really loved them and appreciated them. I hear every soul has an access point of love that they can get into and cocoon in and connect to that feeling state. And I hear saying yes to receiving that for oneself is a process. And I hear another thing in my head now, which is like become intimate with the goddess within and worship her, right? And worship her, like find a practice where you're worshiping the love and the access within you. Like that's a beautiful practice. How many of us wake up in the morning like, I'm gonna find the goddess within and worship her today? Like, what a great to do.
I mean, that might be on my checklist that I'm not supposed to have. Oh my goodness. And that is it. And I do feel that as the feminine, we have been almost castrated out of that feeling state or our
Yeah.
feelings and like the distrust of our emotion or our feeling body. You know, we're all in our head.
Hmm? Yeah. I mean, I feel like it sometimes requires that self-reflection, the pause, the sacred silence of what part of me knows love.
Mm-hmm.
And I even see this scene in my head, in the Akashic field of like watching, I hear something poetic, like watching how the sun wraps around the flower and
Mm.
gives it life is love, right? Which is beautiful. I could cry just thinking about that. And it's like, it's everywhere. And there's a part of you that can observe that and touch that feeling. And that's the feeling we want to worship within ourselves to expand. And I hear all that's fragmented kind of gets rolled up into that. And sometimes the work isn't as much like tackle the shadow as much as it is bring in the light, right? And drink in the light.
And it's been such a process, even on my own journey and my own spiritual expansion around these, it's almost tapping into the other dimension of what's available if we
Yeah.
choose to change our perception. And like speaking of the sun, I had an awareness the other day where it was like there's been a thread, which I know is like a karmic thread, and we can talk about how those get passed down intergenerationally. But of like, I'll never have enough. And as I'm
Mm,
watching this beautiful sunset, I'm like, Alicia, like there is enough sun for every plant and species and organism on the planet. What makes you believe there isn't enough to take care of you?
mm. Yeah. Amen to that.
And I was
Yes.
like, oh, that's the perspective that my soul wants me to shift into.
Yeah. It's a perspective of more, right?
Yeah.
Of all that is, right? It's a abundance energetic, which is a love frequency. It's not lack or limit or finite,
Yes.
which is that separateness here energy that I think so much of us live with every day, as part of our normal reality. So it is a bit of a game changer to go into the world and say, I'm here to notice and feel the access point of love within myself. And it, in the simple ways of watching a person help an animal across the street, like pick up a turtle and move it, there's love in that if you pause to observe and receive that in your heart center. And so I think it's everywhere, and it's simple, and it can be practiced in that way. And I think that's the beginning, and I see this image in my head in the Akasha of a tight spool of thread that starts to unravel, right? And so things start to move and shift in your life. And I think if we're going to make it really simple and really concrete for your listeners, what a good place to start, right? I'm searching for the access point of love within me that knows that feeling. And I'm going to worship that. I'm going to observe that on a daily basis.
And almost make the point to look for love. Like
Oh,
where in the world do
yes.
I see love today?
Yes. Yes.
And
And I think
choose.
some skeptics would call this bypassing, right?
Interesting. Yeah,
Maybe.
sure.
But I think that, I think the Akasha would say, I'm going to say yes. I would say it is expansive. It is a more accurate, true view of what is. Bypassing denotes like we're skipping something. I feel like the lack of acknowledgement of love is more bypassing than the acknowledgement of love in the world.
Yeah. So
Right?
how would you define bypassing? Like if someone's, I have my own way of
Yeah.
looking for that when I'm working with someone, but how would you describe that?
I think that spiritual bypassing in particular is like oversimplified, acknowledged or accepted beliefs or thoughts that protect the person from integrating their full self, like their shadow in some way. And I think it's most oftenly used when folks are talking about things like love and positivity, like, oh, you're just bypassing the shadow. But, my point, I think, is our travesty here on this plane is like really not loving ourselves enough, and that we're bypassing that for the sake of like the deep, epic Scorpio work on the planet. And that's valuable. But I think a full expanded perspective would be to be inclusive of the medicine and the nectar that you find in your shadow hunt, right? While actively, touching that point, looking for that point of love within oneself. Because it's really like a tainted filter, really, like right one way or the other. We could just only see the world from rose-colored glasses or only see the world from the shadow. And that's not a full take.
Wow.
And this is something I like about the Akasha. They talk about here's your patterns, here's your trauma, here's your strengths. Here are the lifetimes where you were really good at something. Let's use that now, right? Like it's a counting and an inventory taking of all that is. And maybe this is a good reflection for everyone who's listening now. Where do I tend to err? Do I tend to be saturated in avoidance, and rose-colored glasses, or am I always looking at what's wrong in myself and in others?
Yeah, it's been incredibly helpful for me personally to notice the ways in which I've been conditioned to always see the bad. Always, I think just from my own history and all kinds of things. But for me, there was never even the possibility that there could be something different. And learning how to hold both is really it's powerful. And I have to catch myself when I go back into like that default mode of anger or fear or stress or all that stuff that we're carrying in us energetically from just being on the earth plane. It takes so much awareness to be able to say, is this how I really want to feel and think about this situation? And knowing my past life history and my karma that you have helped me identify by tapping into my own record with, being a slave driver in a past life and, having to meet this quota for productivity. So when I feel like I have so much to do on my to-do list, I'm easily triggered back into that fear-based state. That from working with you and really doing my own healing work, it doesn't feel good to me anymore. Right. So I know how it has helped me really having access to this information, but what are you seeing across the board as far as people knowing their past life history and being able to tap into their record? How is that helping them really come to a, I don't even want to say it's peace because that's not for everybody, but how do you see
Right.
that assisting people on their journey?
Yeah, great question. I think the number one thing that I see as a benefit is the delineation of time space.
Mm,
So, like your capacity to own all your sovereignty in this moment and recognize that the haunting fear you've had all your life is a karmic PTSD memory and not a reality in this time space is super empowering for people. It's like,
yes.
oh, right, because we drink from this cup, from this fragmented energy, and it in many ways rules our life, right? So we're like, for example, someone who's afraid to have intimacy and vulnerability in relationships, so we never commit, right? We're somebody who feels fear and lack around money, so we overdrive and overwork, and all of these patterns, which I think is not emphasized enough, the value of the anchor of like orientation of time space. Like that's such a powerful part of this work, right? And then all of a sudden you are aware as the watcher that that memory is outside of you, who is the point of power in this moment, and you
Mm,
have a choice in how you interact with it, which is again depersonalization from the trauma itself and positions you as a healer in your own life. How do I choose now to interact with this thought that's associated with a memory? And there's lots of lovely things that we know we can do to anchor healing. And I think what's mind boggling for me in this work, and part of why we're doing the research in Akashic Records, is we already know as a society that trauma lives in the brain long after it's gone.
mm,
Right. So outside of that time space, people are suffering with trauma. Right. So of course, this extends to your ancestry and to your past lifetimes, right? And so we are in many ways like held captive by a lot of those trauma memories and thoughts. And so the ability to be able to work with self-soothing, to use the tools that we know in trauma healing. I mean, you know this as a trauma therapist, are so powerful for people to be able to wrap their head around, to have acknowledgement with, to label, right? I always say to folks, slap a sticker on it and label it for what it is. When you do that, you're separate from it. And now you can interact with it as the healer itself. And we can now choose to participate with those tools that we know are effective in trauma.
yes, that's a beautiful, beautiful answer to that question. It's leading me to ask about how we are our own healers, right? So
How we are.
is that the piece of the separation of I can heal myself? Like what, how do
Ooh,
you
I hear the
see
Akashic
that?
Record Keepers. They said, we would like to correct this statement by this channel, referring to me. And they said, classic, classic Akasha. And I hear, in fact, when we say we are healers, we are not fixing any problems within ourselves because we are never broken. We are
Mm.
just fixing the mind that thinks we are broken. And so then we repair the mind's separation from God. So when we heal ourselves, we are not healing anything. We are just, and they show me like Tetris, just moving things around so that the channel of God is more clearly felt within the soul.
Wow, that's powerful. We are never broken. So there's nothing to be fixed.
Yeah, that's like a can of worms, isn't it? It's like we can go to a lot of places there, and we might have some folks that are like, but I feel broken, right?
Yeah. So this
But are
actually leads me
you?
into something I was going to ask about that was on my mind is how would the Akasha then describe like a dark night of the soul or an ego death? Because we certainly feel like we're broken.
Right, sure. Yeah. Well, I hear the constructs that make us feel safe, that are rooted in falsehood and ego, are in the way of our felt sense of goddessness. And
Mm.
so they deconstruct. And if we've had, I hear, if we project too much power onto those constructs, and so they show me things that people can relate to, like relationships, money, home, materialism, a title, a certain way we look, taking advantage of our health. If we've created this smokescreen that has a lot of power in helping us feel worth and oneness, it deconstructs. I hear that it has a habit, I can say this now, of deconstructing routinely. It's like system, program, reboots, and then like things just break down. And I hear you could call that to yourself more frequently based on your design of your astrology in a given lifetime, almost like you can craft it. And or if there's more projected identity onto those falsehoods, like more power given to those things, almost like they show me like Tetris, or Jenga. You can only go so far before you've reached your max. And so if you want to keep adding up some chips there, it's going to fall, or game's going to be over soon. So it's wise, I hear, to go within self and define identity, to define worth and power in your own sense of, I hear, oneness and connection and divinity, which we believe are different for each soul. How they find that, like the road to that. But be careful to define your identity and your worth outside of you. Be careful of that. And I hear everybody gets a dark night of the soul. It's part of the inheritance of being human, but I just heard now that we can have many, and that there's a way in which we could also eliminate the hardship of that by putting all of our eggs in a basket that is outside of ourselves.
Yeah, so I almost hear or feel that it's the things that we do with our personality self or our ego self that gives us a sense of security and identity in this world, instead of feeling that worth, love, and connection from within us, that then bursts things we desire into the world. Like, we attach to these things that we think make us feel worthy. And if there's too much of that, like we reach the top of the game of Tetris and it's like, walls need to come down. We need to start over. We need to rebuild a new identity, in truth and love and in God.
Yeah. I mean, I just heard them say, you're a great Akashic whisperer. Good. She does a good job interpreting our references. So there was like a sense of like, very well explained. Yeah.
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 And so, interestingly, this is bringing me to another conversation we had around like the uranium opposition or Uranus return, which is what you explained to me in our last call. It's like, I am who I am, who I am, and I'm walking in the world with all of these experiences that I've gathered as my true identity and my true self. So how would you explain to the listeners what that is and what each soul goes through at a certain point in their life with their Uranian opposition?
Yeah, great. So, the Akasha would say that there's several astrological placements that would trigger midlife crisis. And some of those are like the Pluto square. I hear the Neptune square, and most notably the Uranian opposition. And really, it's when, for those who are new to astrology, it's when your personal Uranus and your own chart is making an aspect to the current place of Uranus in the sky. So it's like confronting you personally in some way. And Uranus in particular goes 84 years around for its return. And so it makes aspects every few years. So like 10 or 11, 21, 22, and then we're in the opposition in our 40s, midlife crisis. And so we get to look out for things like, if we're talking Uranus, we're going to say, look out for a desire or an itch to be scratched of greater authenticity, coming forward
Mm.
in your life. So a sense like I'm tired of doing things the way that people want me to do them, or I have an urge to be or dress or say or live or work in a way that is my way, right? Uranus is the ultimate archetype of fierce authenticity.
Mm.
And when we have these initiations, we might look back in our life at various ages, the 11 to 12, 21, 22, we're having more playful interactions, I suppose, with Uranus. Yet when our midlife crisis energy hits, and that's right around the Neptune as well, which is deep psychic awareness of ourselves, we really ask these harder questions. And I hear that these are momentous opportunities. I hear the word opportunity in the Akasha even now to say, like, wow, how can I move with grace towards what is calling me? And I think we don't have to know astrology or read the record to see the landscape and read the energy of our life. And one really great tip for that is if it's creating a ton of suffering and you don't want to do it, and or you're pushing that square into a circle, pay attention to that. Your soul is talking, right? And usually these astrological aspects will make it quite hard for you to continue as is. There usually is a topple of the Tetris and a start over. There usually is some kind of external situation that shows up. But you can also, I mean, I hear this all the time in the Akasha, initiate that with a ton of grace by choosing it willingly. They're always mind boggled by that. And the record keeper's like, why do humans make it so hard? Why do they wait until like they're hobbling along to make a change? Do they forget all the times they died before? For that is nothing new. Don't let it scare you. Live boldly and authentically with every breath that you have. Your watch is ticking.
Oh,
Make it count.
it's so powerful to think of living life that way.
Right? I almost feel like I need to get up and go somewhere now. Like there's a fire under my tush. Like, dang, it makes you scratch your head and look into the mirror long and be like, am I doing it right? Are we doing it?
Yeah, I think we've been so conditioned to fear change.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of like all the uncertainty that's coming on the planet, with
Oh,
this
yeah.
new wave of energy, what does the Akasha say around just the fear or the darkness that's coming out? How do we stay grounded and stay in that alignment with love and trust during times of such uncertainty on the planet right now?
Yes. So I hear you must do that which you don't like to do. And it is clear and it is specific. And I hear accept diversity.
Mm,
We aren't good at that as a human race.
yeah.
We recognize differentiation as threat and fear from communal, tribal, ancestral transference. And we aren't going to evolve. And I hear it's already written, and they show me all the astrology and all the future oriented things that are coming. It's already written, that Aquarius is going to have his way, right? So it's almost like innovation, rebellion, differentiation, creativity, and all of the things that represent diversity. And so the sooner that we accept change, accept differences, and practice tolerance and listening and empathy and seeing the goddessness in the eyes of another,
Mm.
the better go we have it. And I hear it sounds rickety, this ship. You think it's falling apart, and then somehow humans are working together to put it back together while it's sailing. We have faith in you, although you do wait to the last minute, and or you do wait till it's dire. I get a sense of hope from the record keepers about where we're headed. But as you can see now, the multiplication of diverse views and the confusion around what to believe is just simply Aquarian energy. And we're not adjusting so well to that, right? We're kind of like, you believe that. And oh, there's a thought over there that I wasn't sure of. And then we start to run with our children in our homes and hide. It's this like tribal instinctual fear of change. And they said, we would love you all to just drink tea slowly at a table together and stare at each other and listen. You are not different. And as you do that, beautiful collaborative ideas are born. And I hear, and you will get there. But they show me the ship that's got holes in it and people kind of banging each other over the head with the shipboards, like, get it together. So right, like bonk, I don't like you, bonk. And then meanwhile the ship is sinking. Right? Like, oh,
under with all the
yeah. Are you guys gonna take yourself
yeah.
under? And then suddenly everybody says, oh no, we don't want to drown. So then
Now
we
we
start
have to work together.
Yes. They're like, don't wait. Every time I see diversity, even the diversity that's such a rejection to my own values, I'm like, aho to you, aho to that diversity. I see you, Aquarius. Welcome to the planet. And I recognize that my own acceptance of that diversity is one drop of the majority of energy that we need to be contributing to now. And I'd rather be contributing to that than the energetic of fear. Right? Because everywhere I go, I hear people afraid of diversity. That's truly what it is. What's going to happen if this happens, right? This belief that I don't have, this person that I don't like, it's always about fear of change and newness and different. And a label associated with that, right? Like, it's different than me. It is bad. It is threatening. And I hear the Akasha say, can't you just feel the tribal resonance with that? Why isn't it more obvious to those souls there?
What a beautiful end cap. And it is, and it reminds me of the mirror, right? Like what I don't like in another really is something that I need to acknowledge within myself and do that work. And if we could just continue to move in that direction, I do feel that there's hope.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that there are forces of light that are working together much more than we realize, and that what is put in media is more often the shadow, going back to what they said earlier about bypassing the light here and showing only the shadow in media as a way to intoxicate human fear. If there's an intentionality to that. So this even more to the point of go out and look for the sun that wraps the flower,
Wow. Yes. Oh, this was such a joy to talk with you. And I think we covered really all of the questions that I might have for the Akasha. So I would love for you to tell us about the research, about how to join your network for free. I personally love listening to her Akashic Record predictions every month that she offers free content to really dive into the astrology that's coming and give us some key questions to dive into within our own personal journey. She's very gracious to offer an opening every single month. And so tell us how to join the network, how to get into those calls, about the research and what else you have coming up.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, I decided to offer the monthly predictions as a way to provide access for anyone wherever they are to come to the Akashic field and participate in the magnification of love. It's such a great way to hold high vibrational energy together. But also, I mean, I hear the record keepers even now saying we just want to support people in surfing the waves more. We just want people to understand their sovereignty and the power they have to experience life with grace. And so the predictions are really about how to maximize what is alive and how to work together. So in order to participate in one of the live Akashic predictions, you just need to be part of the Rasa Healing Network. And you can do that directly through my website, which is rasahealingservices.com. Or you can go to my Instagram at Rasa Healing, and there are links in both of those places to join the network for free. And once you're there, we also do free, lots of free monthly events and various things. We're actually going to be doing a full week of peace meditations during the American election in November. So you won't want to miss that. If you're looking for a way to participate in grounded energy during that time, we will have an event and a meditation every day of the week of the election. So check that out. I'm also, as Alicia mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, participating in formal research. So just recently we spoke at the NASW Florida conference and shared our research design. And essentially we believe in this work so much and have seen such amazing results in my practice in the Akashic Record, we decided to go for it in terms of mainstream awareness and bring Akashic Records to mental health. And the way we're doing that is we are assessing people's anxiety, depression, and stress levels before and after having Akashic sessions, as well as looking at their levels of resiliency and feelings of connectedness. And all of these scales that we're using are evidence-based and exclusively used in mental health, and we're plucking them from that field and using them in Akashic sessions. So we're hopeful that they show positive upticks and all of those things. And so there'll be some quantitative and qualitative data gathering. So there'll be some interviews and the assessments. And we actually, our hope is to have 100 people through the research. And as it stands today, we have 34 in the protocol so far. So if you are out there listening to this and you would love to be part of like a trailblazing, world changing thing, it's actually never been studied before, we'd love to have you be part of the research. You actually get a discount, 15% discount off of 2 sessions if you're part of the research. And it's 2 sessions to be part of the protocol. And it's amazing. So, you know, we're really excited about it. Our hope is to be done with it by middle of next year and be able to start aggregating some of the data and share it with everybody. And our goal is to paint the town red with the data in all the professional places that would have this work out on the street. We're going to elbow our way in to those conversations and bring our data with us. So that's the plan.
Exciting. Oh my gosh. And I love, just so the listeners here, she got rejected the first time, y'all. Like
I've gotten rejected quite a few times.
Been turned away and turned away and turned away at the social work conference. And for her to just continue to brave through this and listen to the call and answer the call, and for her research to finally be accepted, it says so much to me personally as a mental health practitioner, like for the hope for humanity that we're bringing in a bigger, broader perspective. And people are, you know, they want something different. Like the ways that we've been doing things are just not working. And so the fact that you're able to gather this data and you're going to be able to present this at a national conference is just huge.
Yeah.
It is
I feel
so
more
brave.
motivated like by the people who are participating. Every time I meet someone in the research, it motivates me more. I'm like, I'm going to make this count, you know, like it just feels like a powerful way to change the world. And that's really the reason why we're doing it. So thanks for letting me talk about that. And also I do train people. Alicia is trained in the Akashic Record. And I do train folks to read their own record, as well as learn how to read the record of their ancestors. And then subsequently down the road, we'll be offering training for how to read other people's records. Anyone can learn to do it. And our next module 1 training is October 15th. So we usually sell out pretty quickly. So if you're interested in learning about that, you can find out all about it in the Rasa Healing Network or through Instagram. There's a waitlist link where you can get an email as well.
I love that. And what about people who are not sure if they're able to read their own record? What's
Yeah, you know, that was a question my husband asked me, and I tell the story often. Like, he's like, what happens if you do this and people can't learn to read the record? And my answer is like, well, I'll be issuing a lot of refunds, you know? And knock on wood, we've had over 90 people trained in the Akashic Record. Every single person who's taken the training has learned to read the record because we are spiritual beings and we have the capacity to tap into all those, you know, versions of ourselves. And so I've not met that person yet. This is not a challenge for that person to come. You know, I feel like eventually there may be someone who struggles, but truly we have the capacity to open those doors. And I think the training is such where I did the entire content while channeling the record, right? So all of the tricks and tips of the trade are there to teach you how to tap into that knowledge and to know that it's not coming from you.
I love that explanation. And speaking from experience, I was one that was incredibly hesitant because I wouldn't consider myself someone that does meditation all day or tunes into my psychic gifts. And the material that you offer and the way that the training is structured it's such a powerful energy that you tap into places that you didn't even know were available inside of you. So if you're hesitant about module 1 or learning how to read your own record, I highly advise you to consider it. And it's such an invaluable tool for me to tune in and to get high level information from the record keepers or my ancestors has been really pivotal in trusting my intuition and that internal guidance and really giving me that strength for making decisions and for learning about myself. And so I just encourage you all to do all things Rasa healing and follow Candice. She is an incredible teacher and such a light to this world. And I thank you so much for sharing your energy with us today and for all of your expertise.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And it's a beautiful full circle moment to hear you start this podcast talking about how strange it was to hear somebody talking about their higher self. And here you are, like Akashic reader trained, right? Like reading your own record. It's amazing to see the blossoming that you've been on in your journey. And I'm grateful to serve with you on this planet. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.
What an incredibly powerful episode. I hope that you found so much value over the information that Candice was sharing, that it inspires you to want to dig deeper into your own Akasha and into your own past life history for why you are feeling the way that you're feeling and what you came to experience and overcome and alchemize in this life. She is such a wealth of information. And as you can see, she has an incredibly loving way of really directing you back to the truth of your own heart. You know, at our core, we are divine loving beings and we can see the good in all, but and the good in each other. But we get so caught up with this fear-based matrix that it takes us out of alignment with truth and trust and curiosity and understanding. And as she said, the goddessness that is of this planet and of this realm that we have been conditioned out of. So I hope that you feel inspired to be a part of the research, to maybe even learn how to read your own record and tap into your own Akasha the way that I have. It is high level, advanced information that you have already within you to access at any point that you want to. And it has been a pivotal tool in helping me become the woman I am today, to feel safe in my body and to see the good in people and to trust again and to play again through my own trauma and through my own pain and all the suffering that I endured in the first half of my life. I now know that having this tool and having access to these teachers and this information, that it is done. Like the suffering, the struggle, the pain, the constant worry is just not part of my nervous system anymore. And you have that available to you as well. So please consider joining Module 1. And if nothing else, hop in the network. I would love to see you on the Akashic Prediction calls and to have you be a part of this beautiful conscious community of spiritually advanced people.